Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, bringing you another great episode with an amazing guest, Mr. Harry Spaight. Harry has a company called Selling with Dignity, and we're doing this podcast episode on selling with dignity, building your company with humanity. And the reason we're doing this, and we're talking a lot about intrinsically motivated people and extrinsically motivated people, we're talking about how to build a sustainable process of sales and business in doing this with selling with dignity and building with humanity. Now, why is it important to understand where people are motivated from? Well, the reason behind that is because when you understand where their motivation comes from, and let's say they work for you, you'll understand how to motivate them. If you try to take somebody who is externally motivated, extrinsically motivated, money motivated, and you're trying to impart, say, adulations and gifts and things like that, but they're not what they're really looking for, it won't motivate them. And then in reverse, if they're internally motivated or intrinsically motivated, and you're trying to give them, high cash bonuses, for example, they might appreciate it, but it's not motivating them like something like personal recognition or, being recognized as a person who stands above their peers or stands with their peers, but is a leader in that capacity and is recognized for certain traits. So we're going to talk a lot about why this matters and how it is a revenue generating activity or a revenue generating activity that can trickle, or it could actually be a detractor from revenue if you don't understand how to motivate your people. Why would it be a detractor? Well, you lose these people. You lose these people. It is very clear in the data that when I look at data, that people do not leave normally because of money. They will leave a job more so for other factors than just money. Now, don't get me wrong. They want to make money. They want to live a life. Most people don't want to live a life that's just a little above their expectations. And these expectations change over time. Sometimes people are extrinsically motivated when they're younger, and they're more intrinsically motivated as they get older because they want to give back. So pay attention to the clues. Harry and I are going to talk about this. Let's go to the interview and let's talk with Harry right now. Here we go. Harry, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here. And let's bring your A game, because I know you will, because we've talked about this before.
The pressure's on. I'm happy to be here, Doug. What is the good word?
So we're going to talk about salespeople today and how they're intrinsically and extrinsically motivated. Mm-hmm. And how using that profile, because your expertise and using that expert profile actually can help build revenue or detract revenue out of a company, depending on how they play that. Mm-hmm. So I always don't, when I do these, Harry, I never let any stone be unturned. So why don't we define what an intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated salesperson would be? Could you give us those definitions, please?
Yeah. So, we would want to look at it as that people who are motivated because they're just going to do the right thing. Right. And it's just, so if you think about in sales and maybe a company's objectives, some people are going to buy into that and do things the way that the company wants, just because that's the way they're made. And then others, they're going to have to find ways to motivate the people with maybe, more of the, awards, the prizes, money. I mean, surprisingly, not everyone is money motivated in sales. I think some businesses think that we're all the same, that, put money in front of a salesperson and they're going to go for it. But, sometimes people are driven by culture. They're driven by doing the right thing. They're driven by having a sense of team. So there's a lot of different things that are going on that's inside a salesperson's mind. We're not all the same. What do you think? Do you agree with that?
I firmly agree with that. The data actually supports it too. When I look at data, it's something like it's more the 80-20 rule, but it's more like the 90-10 rule, that really the top 10% are really more extrinsically motivated. But it doesn't mean that you can't be in the top 10% being intrinsically motivated as well. It's just that people are motivated in different levels. And so
Exactly.
If we understand how they're motivated, then as managers or owners of companies, we can also understand how to get the most productivity out of these people as well. So I 100% agree. And depending on whether they're intrinsically or extrinsically motivated, it also depends on what position they should be in, should they not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think that goes into sales leadership too, right? I don't know if you want to touch on that, but
by all means,
right? It's just, you have someone who is a top performer, and I think historically, I think I was one of those too, but you get promoted because of your performance. And, I've done it. I've promoted people based on their performance. And I remember a situation where this person, young man who came out of the healthcare, actually he's a gym membership guy. And he did everything the right way, right? I mean, he listened to me. I mean, I gave him guidance. He put everything into practice. He just wasn't a top performer, but he was a steady Eddie guy, lunch pail guy, performed every month, but he was not necessarily near the top.
Right.
I thought it'd be a great idea to promote him into sales leadership because he was doing the right thing. And people are saying, well, he's not a top performer. What about this guy? And, that other person was promoted. I didn't promote the person, but they put him on another team to lead a team. And within 3 months, that person was back working for me because he felt like everybody should be just doing their job. Whereas this other person that I described earlier, the intrinsically motivated one, was doing the right thing and building a team and became much more successful.
Yeah. One of the biggest mistakes I see repetitively, and it doesn't mean 100%, but when I look at companies and they take their top performers and they try to throw them into management, because that's kind of like, well, hey, Doug is great at sales. Let's make him a manager. Well, you know what? There's a very different profile for a sales manager than there is for a top producing salesperson.
Right.
And so, I always tell people, look, be careful about wrecking 2 jobs at one time.
Yeah, totally. Right.
And so that's kind of what you just described, right? I mean, the person went in, they bailed out in 3 months. How much lost revenue is there in that company from those 3 months worth of, not stellar performance, right?
Yeah. Tons and tons of turnover, right? I mean, he basically went through his entire team because he's, said they all sucked, for lack of a better word, because they weren't of his caliber.
Right.
And so, he had a right, in his mind to say that. But, when you have massive turnover, so now you lose his performance, right? And what you could have gained by hiring the right person and the loss from the team that left.
Right.
So there's really, millions of dollars basically are impacted by that.
Yeah. And this concept of intrinsic, extrinsic is so important. I think there's an old saying, now I'm dating myself. But I think the saying is, it's easier to pull a string uphill than push it.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think it was like a wet piece of spaghetti is the one I refer to. Like, try to push a wet noodle versus pulling it. It's a big
Yeah,
difference.
yeah, so-
similar concept.
So Harry, you and I are showing our senior age of I can imagine this millennials or Gen Z,
Right. Yeah.
listening to this going, what are they talking about?
Let's talk about the horseback riding we did between sales calls, right?
Absolutely. Because we didn't have cars. No,
Right.
so we had a tin can and a string.
Yes.
So the thing is if we're trying to motivate someone, I mean, if we think about this in the terms of, let's say we have a personal relationship, right? We got a spouse, and our spouse or our significant other is intrinsically motivated, and we're trying to extrinsically motivate that person. That's going to create a lot of stress in the relationship.
Right. Yeah.
And vice versa, right? So when we're utilizing employees or people who are independents in our organization, it's important for us to know how they're motivated, because clearly studies show that money motivates salespeople to some degree. But as you said, recognition can motivate in a higher manner than actually cash. And so in one of my jobs that I had where I was selling, I was winning these awards because I was one of the top producers in the company.
Yeah.
And they ran this auction, I remember, at the end of the year, and they would give points for the amount of sales. And I had like bazillions of points. So people were like, I'll take this television for 30,000, 40,000. I'm like, I'll give you 200,000 for these points, because I had so many points. I knew I could buy everything there, right? And so I would take these gifts, and I would take the gift down. One of them was like back then, I think it was a 35-inch television or 40-inch television, whatever it was. And I would take these to the people who would give me the most referrals, and I would come in and I would say, "Happy holidays, Merry Christmas," whatever, right? And I would bring the television, wheel the television in, and say, "Hey, whoever wants this in your organization, please, dole this out on my behalf." Now, you could say that was extrinsically motivated, but intrinsically, the owners of those companies were able now to create some type of value within the organization and recognize employees with the gifts that I gave them. And what happened to me? I started getting far more referrals from these companies, right? So we can intrinsically motivate. And when we're selling to people, if we know if they're intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated, we can change our language patterns in order to match up this, right? So now you wrote a book, Selling with Dignity. I love the title of the book.
Thank you.
What is it all about? I mean, it should say, the title is probably saying it all, but
Yeah, I think the easiest way to sum it up is it's selling coming from a place of serving. And so many in sales, it's all about what you get and how much money you can make, and the Rolex and the nice cars and the big homes and so forth. When I got into sales, I was coming out of the missionary field. So I was living in a third world country, little electricity, a little running water every day for a few hours. And when I got into sales, I was hearing all these things about money, and I just said, I just want to earn a living. I want to earn a living. I want to be part of something. I want to help people. That's who I am. And so as I was built my career, and I didn't realize this going in, right? I mean, these are things you look back and say, oh, that's what I was doing. When all the conversations about being the top rep did not appeal to me at all. Making tons of money. Once I made more than I ever dreamt of making, I didn't feel like I needed to keep making more, because it was quality of life things. And so as I, went through COVID, these ideas, not that I had COVID, but during that time period, the downtime, I just started reflecting on my career and business. And I said, And I always thought about writing a book, tying in the mission background with sales, but I felt like now was the time, because there are people like me in business and sales that think the way I do, and they don't really have a voice, right? They're the outsiders, they're the quiet ones that just do their job every day and occasionally get a pat on the back. They're not necessarily getting all the awards, but companies love them because they're loyal, they're producing. And I just wanted to build a community for those types of people, really, and give them something of value.
And then they are the majority of people working.
Yeah.
Right. And so organizations, we all like to do this, right? We like to, like Rocky, the movie, right? Rocky was the underdog and Rocky won and all this stuff, right? And we all celebrate Rocky. If you go to Pennsylvania and, to Philadelphia, you'll see people today still running up and down the steps of that library, right? And on the top dancing like Rocky did. Yeah. And so we all like to highlight that because it's like a great thing that, and so if I take this analogous to sales, we all like the person who's whacking it out of the park every single time. And we all go, wow, that's great, right? But the majority of people, especially today, Harry, especially today, it's, as you said, it's now magnified that the majority of people are more like, I want to make a better quality of life just a little bit than I need to. And I'm happy. Yeah. Right. So you can be wealthy and still do that. So from here's my question, because from a manager standpoint or an owner standpoint, is it a bad thing to have all these people who are just hitting quota every single month and happy as can be?
Yeah. I love the question. Yeah. I was talking to an owner a couple of years ago about this, and he was thinking about growth, and he was second or third generation, and he just didn't have that fire that some entrepreneurs have. And his thing was, I just want to have a solid company where people enjoy coming to work, and everybody prospers that way. He shares at the end of the year. I think there are multi-generations in the business, so there's some money set aside, obviously, and he shares, if they have a good year, everybody gets a nice check. And you look at that, there's no turnover, right? People don't leave a company like that, so their clients are getting consistency. And I don't argue with that, right? When we have the discussions about you've got to have some growth, they buy in over time that you have to have growth or you're going backwards, but it doesn't have to be, where you're risking jobs, you turn into a task manager and micromanager of people, and you push people out because that culture just works for the clients. People love the stability. And it works. The company keeps making money. So it's like, and it's kind of like what Simon Sinek says, right? I mean, Simon Sinek is not about, laying off people because your company is not having a great year and you've got to, make the shareholders happy by, cutting staff. Maybe everyone takes a little bit of a bite, so yeah. So I lean that direction.
So I'm glad we're having this conversation, because so many business owners don't know their own measuring stick. They really don't. I talk to them and they're like, they want to grow. Well, how much? I want to double, triple my sales this year. Right. Okay. Let's talk about what it takes to do that. Well, that's a lot of work. Like, no kidding. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So, there's entrepreneurial thought, there's entrepreneurial action, there's entrepreneurial commitment. So when you go to the commitment side of the thing, and I start talking to them, what they really want to do is have that steady running company with lower stress and decent profitability.
Yeah.
Right. And for some reason, worldwide, in some cases, people look at that and they go, that's not enough. You can't grow by 2%, 5%, every single year. You've got to double, triple up, you got to just push. And what I found with the pandemic is that shift happened where people are like, you know what? I got people who are dying around me. I've got this happening. I'm looking at my life a little differently. And I found that sales has now become shifted to the point where even long discovery sessions, which used to be the key, like get to know this and get to know that and just ask a million questions, that's shifted to a shorter time frame where people will tolerate that because they're looking at my son or daughter has a soccer game, and I need to get out to live more of a quality of life. So I think selling with dignity, what I got out of this was that it's about having a life of dignity and looking back and saying, okay, as I get older and I'm in the little rocking chair thinking about my life, did I, as Dave Thomas said, build the worst thing I ever could have built, which destroyed my whole life because it took his whole life. That's what he said. He's like, I had no time for my family. I had no time for this. In the interview I heard him do, or, hey, I can pass this on to my generations and I'm taken care of too. And everybody had a good time. And, like you said, multi-generations, the grandkids are here, the kids are here, There's a company, I just bought a couple of pellet stoves for the home. And because oil is so high right now, it's crazy.
That's right.
Plus, I wanted to get off that dependency.
New England, you need oil. I forgot. Big tanks in the basement.
Crazy. They're telling me my oil bill alone would be $12,000 to $15,000 this year for the house.
Oh, lovely.
I was like, oh, okay. Okay. Well, let's
plan B, please.
It's not like I can't do it. It's just like it's just against my nature to want to do something like that, right?
Yes.
So I bought these pellet stoves, and the family was so wonderful to work with. They're all called All Basic Stoves, but they're multi-generation. Mm-hmm. So you go in there and you feel like family when you're in there.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is a point I wanted to ask you. When we're building our organization, to me, it makes sense, but should we build the organization based on the clientele we want to attract and then hire people to match that?
Yeah. Well, I think the answer to that is just that. I think it starts with having the vision as to what you want from your business, right? And I think a lot of people miss out on those early steps and they say, well, I'll do business with anybody because all business is good business. Money is green. And they just go everywhere. They're very too diversified, right? They're going after a lot of different directions. And then they have problems, right? Then they realize that not all business is good business. When you're trying to collect money from people that don't pay, that's not good business. Right. So that's just one example. You have the squeaky wheels, right? Where you're giving way too much time to a client that, someone who is bigger, better, more financially stable is not going to be dragging you down with all kinds of requests. And so there's a lot of different reasons, but I think starting out with the vision as to what you really want. And I think quality of product, if you're creating products like wood stoves, there's still tons of value, even though a lot of companies will say, I've got to keep a competitive edge and outsource everything to overseas. There's a lot of people, right? And there may not be as many, but there'll always be people that want to buy local, that will want to buy US made. I went into a shoe store recently, and the shoe store culture was from like I'm going to age myself, but from the 1970s, right? You had a family run shoe store, all kinds of different shoes. They were not cheap. And I said, I'm looking for, this may be a crazy request. I'm looking for something that's American made. And they brought me over to the wall of American made shoes. Price was higher, but so what? You look at how long the shoes are going to last, how long is the wood stove going to last? Right. It's like your cost per year it's minimal. It doesn't matter. And, that place was packed, Doug. I mean, it was packed. They had 3 people on the cash registers. The money's flying around. I'm like, what a gold mine. And you go to what? Payless shoe stores and all these dumb places now that are franchised, or not even franchised. Everything's made outside of America. Nobody knows the shoe business.
Right.
And it's just these people are passionate and serving and doing a great business, and the place been around forever. And it's just, that's the kind of place I would want.
What's interesting to me about this conversation, Harry, is certainly how you feel about it as our generation, but the Gen Zs, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are now starting to think in that capacity. I hear them talking, my children are 20, 21, 23,
Yep.
themselves, their friends, they're talking about, they'll call it retro. They call it retro, which is funny, right? It's like,
yeah.
But they are gravitating back toward that. It's going and finding clothing that was made in the 80s, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
70s or older. So it's one of these things I see a shift happening. And I wanted to bring up something for people on this who are listening. And by the way, we're listening to Mr. Harry Spaight, correct? Spaight?
Spaight works, yes.
He has a company called Selling with Dignity, wrote a book called Selling with Dignity. And Harry, how can people get a hold of you if they want to?
Sellingwithdignity.com works, Doug. That's the easiest. Yep.
We'll put that in the show notes. I wanted to let people know that people over time also shift from intrinsic to extrinsic, or extrinsic to intrinsic. And what I find is when we're younger, many of us are extrinsically motivated far more, right? Mm-hmm. And as we start to grow a little older and we start to accumulate some wealth and some things like that, we start shifting from extrinsically motivated more to intrinsically motivated type activities and thoughts.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And so the mistake I see companies make is they're not treating people as the individual and looking at them like, let's say they've been there for 30 years. Well, when they first got there, they might have been having children and they were far more extrinsically motivated, but now their home is paid off and the things are, easier. And now they're looking to take care of their children or grandchildren. That might extrinsically motivate them. But a lot of times they're looking also now at their own lives going, okay, we're empty nesters, want to downsize the house. We want to, that was weird.
Yeah.
But what we were talking about was it shifts from intrinsically to extrinsically, or extrinsically to intrinsically over time for people. And that we, as somebody who's owning a company or managing a company or want to grow a company, we have to treat people as individuals in the organization versus just blanket management across the board. Or we will have, as you said earlier on with that other person, turnover.
Yeah.
Right. And turnover is extremely costly to a company.
Absolutely.
The average is between 150 and 250% of their annual base salary.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's the average, right? So usually on a sales channel, it's 150%. Sales managers are 250%. So when you were talking about that company that lost the sales manager and they lost X amount of salespeople, let's say they were all making, I don't know, $100,000 a year, right? And they lost 5 of them. There's 750 plus the manager. There's $1 million right there. And as you said, it was millions of dollars that was lost in the process.
Yeah.
So let's say somebody is interested, Harry, and they're going, okay, you guys caught my attention. I want to kind of figure out how to do this. Any advice for them on how to kind of evaluate whether they're intrinsically or extrinsically motivated?
I think the number one thing is to have conversations with your people. And this is, I'm going to think about this same company that I talked about that was looking at keeping, not about huge growth, has an older salesperson. And that person is just not driven like he was years ago. And you could look at that and say, yeah, well, that person needs to move on. We've got to fill his shoes. We can't, for whatever reason, right? it doesn't fit in with the rules.
Right.
And if you can be flexible enough and say, here's a person that brought us millions and millions of dollars over the years. What can we do for that person? And is it working 20 hours a week? Is it helping that person bring on a new rep that works as kind of a junior rep? Or maybe that person kind of goes into more customer support and some sales. But you find roles, in my opinion, you find roles for people that are good for the company, and maybe things have changed. And so having an open mind, instead of saying, you're not doing what you did 5 years ago, you got to either shape up or ship out, right? That is one mentality. And I just don't think that's the right mentality. Mm-hmm. But having conversations and just taking the fear away that the person could say the wrong answer. And just when you're having these conversations, it's like, I'm curious, how do you really feel? Right? There's no judgment here. This is a safe tree. And if you actually live by that safe tree, but if you go back and you say, well, you said something that's not safe. So, I mean, that's a whole nother challenge. But if you've built up a reputation where you said, I can trust you, you can trust me, I want to know how you really feel, we're going to make this work one way or another, and I'm always going to look out for your best interests. That to me is the conversation. And you just keep having those conversations with people, maybe once a year. It doesn't have to be every month, but periodically you want to know where people are, and just do the gut check and see if they're, thinking the same way as you are.
What I think about that is, you wrote a book called Selling with Dignity, and the message is sell with dignity, build with humanity, right?
Yeah.
And we all love going to a place to buy something with that person who is so invested in the process of us buying something without manipulation.
Right.
And they're just genuinely there, right? There's restaurants, right? People go to their, there's hundreds of restaurants in the area, but people generally will go back to the top 3 to 5 restaurants that they feel connected to the most.
Right. When
you trace that back, it's usually the server. They'll actually go in. I know I do this. I go in and I go, hey, is Michelle working today? Is Joe working today? Whatever, sure. Right? And I want to be in their section because they make me feel great, because naturally they love what they do. Now, are they intrinsically or extrinsically motivated? I think everybody's a little bit of both, right? But in that type of position, they're more intrinsically motivated usually, right? But even going to whatever, an airline, we will bond with the airline that treats us in the way that we want to be treated.
True.
We will bond and go back to buy an automobile. We will buy a manufacturer's representative over another manufacturer's representative. Why? Because we're human beings. We want to have humanity, and we want to be sold to with dignity. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And so many people make so much out of selling that it's like they convolute this whole process to understand that, yeah, they have a title, a person, but they're a person, and they want to feel good. That's what that's why they're buying something. They want to get out of pain, or they have an opportunity they want to capitalize to feel better than they are.
All right, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
All right. How often you hear the word love in sales?
Very infrequently.
All right. So I look at sales. My first sales book I read was Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino.
Mandino, yep.
Right. The second scroll, he's got 10 scrolls. The second scroll is the scroll with love. And he says, I will greet each day with love in my heart. Now, I read that book, and I read it again when I got started in sales. Nobody was talking about love, right? It was about, you hit your number, close hard, hold on to profit. It wasn't about loving your client. And what you just described is really love. And when you love people and you want to serve them, and it's such mindset, but if you look at the person across from you and say, I love this person, and you just send that vibration, and I know that may sound weird for some people, but I've done it for years, and it's just like, I'm going to put this on the table myself. I'm not saying to the person I love them, right? But I'm going to say, I love the person across from me, and I'm going to treat the person the best way I possibly can. I'm telling you, it is a world of, where you're going to do the right thing. Do I always do it? Absolutely not. Right. But when I remember that that's where my priorities are, sometimes you get frustrated and you lose sight of that, which has happened. But by and large, if you have that mindset, your business is going to thrive.
If you have that mindset, you'll always stay in rapport.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Because we won't position in a different way in the selling entity. Most of the time, rapport is broken by the seller, not the sellee.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because they're just raising a concern, right? Whatever it is, they're raising a concern, and the seller may take offense at that.
Yeah.
They may feel like they need to overcome, like the common thing is overcome objections.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, look, they have a concern. You don't overcome concerns. You help people with concerns.
I had a client call the other day. I was listening to it, and the guy literally came in. Salesperson was on the line, and this was the conversation. The man came in and goes, "Your company sucks." Like they were calling upon him. Hi, just checking in with you. Your company sucks. I don't like you. I don't like your company. I don't like today. I don't like anything about anything. I never want to do business with you again.
Lovely.
Right. Okay. I stepped in and I said, I really appreciate you telling me all this. I'm so curious. What happened?
Right.
Right. And so we got talking, and then the other sales rep joined back in, and we got talking, and it turned out it was a minor thing that this person was having a really hard time in life, but this minor thing that the company did just set this person off in a blaze, and they were just looking to vent. And I was looking at the other salesperson just smiling, right? Because I knew if we played with humanity, sold with dignity, that there was a good possibility that this person would stay as a client, right? Yeah. And you know what happened? They ended up buying another thing from this company.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
You listen to them.
From you guys suck, they're telling other people about the company. Right. This is intrinsically motivated, folks. Those of you who are wondering why Harry and I are talking about this. So you want to be intrinsically motivated and be empathetic to people. And then you could be extrinsically motivated with the people who are, high D's on the scale of testing, right? And that person, like, what's the bottom line, kid? I want to get to that point. So, Harry, I really appreciate you being here on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Any final closing thoughts that you leave with people?
Yeah, first of all, I'm super grateful that you had me on the podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation. A couple of like minds. Is that when you're, looking at your business right now as you're going, whenever this is aired, is look at the people that are working with you and ask, when was the last time I had a great conversation, a heart-to-heart with the person that I'm working with, that's part of the team. And let's just see where they are and make sure I'm serving them and doing the right thing to help them thrive so my business can thrive. And that's all I got. But this has been a blast. I mean, I didn't realize where the conversation was going. So, I mean, not that I didn't know where it was you were directing, but I just love where it kept going. So it's great stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, we don't have anything scripted here. As you can tell, when that thing dropped it out, I mean, so we just picked it back up. So,
yeah.
Again, thanks for being here, Harry, and come back again, please.
Okay. Thanks, Doug.
All right. So what'd you learn? Did you learn that you can't treat everyone the same way and expect to hold on to people long term? It just doesn't work, because people are people. People have feelings. People have things that they're thinking through. And if you want to build a sustainable company, try building it with humanity. What does that mean? Well, show you people you care about them. Keep things in motivation land on a consistent basis. Yeah, you've got a lot to do and it's a lot of extra work. But the reality is if you do this right, your people will go above and beyond to help out your clientele. I remember a conversation that I was listening to and between two people, and one was about the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas. And an employee at the Wynn Hotel, somebody came, stay at the Wynn Hotel, but they forgot their heart medication. And an employee got in a vehicle and drove 2 hours one way to pick up their heart medication and come back on the employee's own time. Think about this. If you were ever going to go back to Las Vegas and somebody was doing that for your mother or your grandmother, would you stay anywhere but the Wynn Hotel, or at least give it primary consideration? This is a person who was intrinsically motivated, and people who are intrinsically motivated love what they do when they're in the right position, and they will bring more clientele to you. They will expand your circle of influence, and they will get you more referrals. That's just how it works. Again, Harry and I talked about in the podcast, take your favorite person that you go to a restaurant, right? Or you go to a favorite airline or hotel or whatever it might be. It applies to B2B as much as it applies to B2C. You would prefer to buy from your representative of a company that is treating you with humanity and treating you and selling with dignity and motivating you in the way you want to be motivated. And it's that simple. If you love this episode, please, as always, I ask, go give it a great review. 5-star review would be appreciated. If you have an episode that you think you would be a great expert on, reach out to us at YouMatter. That's YOUMATTER at ceosalesstrategies.com. And let us know your idea. Or if you have somebody you want to recommend, let us know what their idea is as well. We review everything and get back to you. If you want to get yourself or someone you know in the top 1% of sales, in other words, in your industry, in the top 1%, reach out to me directly at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. And in the future, I'm going to be running an academy, an acceleration academy for people who want to be in the top 1% of sales. Decided to go in and take some people on and help them get there. So in a training environment. Now, I do this for companies and I do this for entrepreneurs. What I'm going to do this for is in a group setting and make this affordable for anyone who wants to be in that type of place. And if you're interested in that, again, reach out to us at YouMatter or doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. If you want to check me out on LinkedIn, Doug Brown 123, and that is my LinkedIn handle. Until next time, please go out and sell something, sell a lot of it, sell it profitably, do it win-win. So you win, they win, sell with humanity, sell with dignity. Go make someone happy. It'll make you happy today as well. This is Doug Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Until next time, to your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.